12th October, 1942. Cape Esperance, Guadalcanal, 2,351 hours. The Japanese heavy cruiser Aoba, displacement 9,000 tons, steams at approximately 28 knots. Her captain, Kikunori Kijima, stands on the bridge scanning the darkness. The cruiser is part of a bombardment force sent to shell Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. Intelligence reports indicate the American presence is limited. No significant naval forces should be in the area. The intelligence is wrong. At 2,352 hours, American cruisers opened fire at range of approximately 4,600 meters. The first salvo strikes Aoba's bridge. 8-inch shells from USS Salt Lake City penetrate the armored structure. The explosions kill Captain Kijima instantly. They kill most of the bridge crew. They destroy the ship's command center. The cruiser, suddenly decapitated, continues moving at high speed with no one directing her. Shells continue striking. The second salvo hits Aoba's forward turrets. The third hits amidships, starting fires. Within 3 minutes, Aoba has been hit by approximately 40 shells. She is burning from bow to stern. Her bridge is destroyed. Her captain is dead. Her communications are severed. She has no functioning command structure. She should sink. The damage is catastrophic. But Aoba does not sink. She does not even stop. Her engines continue running. Her damage control parties begin fighting fires. Officers in the aft command station attempt to regain control. The ship turns away from the American formation, making smoke, disappearing into darkness. This is the first time Aoba is reported sunk. American forces observe her burning. Listing, clearly destroyed. After action reports state that heavy cruiser, probably Aoba class, was sunk or severely damaged. The Navy Department in Washington receives the report. Aoba is added to the list of Japanese ships destroyed at Cape Esperance. But Aoba is not destroyed. She is damaged, burning, with half her crew dead or wounded, but her hull is intact. Her engines function. Her pumps work. She limps away from the battle and somehow makes it back to Truckee. She will be reported sunk 5 more times before the war ends. She will survive them all. To understand how Aoba became the ghost cruiser of the Solomons, you need to understand both the ship and the peculiar circumstances that allowed her to survive long after she should have been destroyed. The Aoba was launched in September 1926 at Mitsubishi's Nagasaki shipyard. She was part of the Aoba class, an evolution of earlier Japanese cruiser designs. Displacement was 9,000 tons standard, 9,950 tons fully loaded. Length was 185.17 meters. Beam was 17.56 meters. Draft was 5.61 meters. Her main armament was 6 8-inch guns and 3 twin turrets, 2 forward, 1 aft. These were Type E2 naval rifles, firing 200-kilogram shells to maximum range of approximately 29,300 meters. Her secondary armament included 4 4.7-inch guns and 8 torpedo tubes for the deadly Type 93 Long Lance torpedo. Her protection was modest. Belt armor ranged from 76 to 102 millimeters. Deck armor was 35 millimeters. Turret faces were 25 millimeters. By modern standards, she was lightly armored. Her design philosophy prioritized speed and firepower over protection. Maximum speed was approximately 34.5 knots, excellent for a cruiser of her era. She was commissioned in September 1927. For 14 years, she served in peacetime duties, training exercises, fleet reviews, showing the flag. She was obsolete before the war began. Newer cruiser classes had better armor, better fire control, better damage control. But Japan entered the war with limited heavy cruiser strength. Aoba was needed despite her age. When the Pacific War began in December 1941, Aoba was assigned to Cruiser Division 6 along with her sister ships Kinugasa and Furutaka. The division participated in the invasion of the Philippines, the conquest of the Dutch East Indies, multiple operations in the opening months of the war. Aoba performed adequately but was clearly inferior to newer ships. In August 1942, the Guadalcanal campaign began. American forces landed on Guadalcanal to capture the Japanese airfield being constructed there. The campaign became a grinding attritional battle. Both sides fed forces into the Solomons, trying to achieve local superiority. Naval battles occurred regularly, as both navies attempted to reinforce their ground forces and interdict enemy reinforcements. Aoba participated in the Battle of Savo Island on 9 August 1942. Japanese forces, including Aoba, surprised American cruisers patrolling off Guadalcanal. The battle was a Japanese victory. 4 American cruisers were sunk. Aoba suffered minor damage from shell hits, but nothing serious. She returned to Rabaul for quick repairs. 2 months later came Cape Esperance. The Japanese planned to bombard Henderson Field with cruisers and destroyers, disrupting American air operations. The Americans, having learned from Savo Island, positioned a cruiser force to intercept. Rear Admiral Norman Scott commanded American cruisers San Francisco, Salt Lake City, Boise, and Helena plus destroyers. The Japanese force, commanded by Rear Admiral Aritomo Goto aboard Aoba, approached Guadalcanal on the night of 11th to 12th October. The formation consisted of 3 cruisers, Aoba, Furutaka, and Kinugasa, plus 2 destroyers. They expected minimal opposition. Intelligence had not detected the American cruisers. At 2330 hours, American radar detected the Japanese formation. Scott maneuvered his cruisers to cross the Japanese T, the classic naval tactic of positioning your line perpendicular to the enemy, so all your guns bear while only the enemy's forward guns can respond. By 2350 hours, Scott had achieved perfect position. The Japanese were sailing directly into his gun line. At 2351 hours, Helena opened fire without orders. Her radar had perfect targeting solution. She could not wait. Salt Lake City and Boise joined immediately. The Japanese were illuminated by searchlights and engaged at point-blank range for a cruiser action. Aoba, leading the Japanese formation, received the brunt of fire. The first salvo hit her bridge. Captain Kojima was killed by shell fragments. Most of the bridge crew died. The ship's command structure was destroyed instantly. Admiral Goto, also on the bridge, was mortally wounded. He died shortly after the battle. The ship should have lost control. Without a functioning bridge, coordination was impossible. But Aoba's design included an aft command station for exactly this contingency. Lieutenant Commander Shiro Sato, the navigating officer, was in the aft station when the bridge was destroyed. He assumed command immediately. Sato's situation was desperate. He had no communication with the rest of the ship beyond voice tubes and runners. He did not know the extent of damage. He could see that the ship was on fire, that shells were hitting continuously, that men were dying. He made the only logical decision: turn away, make smoke, escape. Aoba turned to starboard, presenting her stern to the American cruisers. Her aft turret continued firing. Shells still struck her, but fewer now that she was pulling away. The fires spread, but damage control parties fought them. The ship was dying, but not yet dead. At approximately midnight, Aoba broke contact. She disappeared into darkness and rain squalls. The Americans did not pursue aggressively. They had other targets. Aoba escaped. The damage was catastrophic. The bridge was destroyed. The forward section was riddled with shell holes. Fires burned in multiple compartments. Casualties were approximately 80, killed and approximately 90 wounded from a crew of 650. The ship was barely functional, but the hull was intact. The engines worked. The rudder responded. Sato directed the ship north, away from Guadalcanal, toward Japanese bases. The voyage lasted 3 days. Damage control parties fought fires continuously. The wounded were treated in makeshift aid stations. The dead were buried at sea. Aoba limped to Shortland Islands, then to Rabaul, then to Truk. At Truk, the damage was assessed. The ship required months of repairs. The entire bridge structure needed rebuilding. The forward sections needed extensive work. Multiple hull breaches needed patching. The repair facilities at Truk were inadequate. Aoba needed a major dockyard. She sailed to Kure Naval Arsenal in Japan in November 1942. The voyage was risky. Submarines hunted the route, but she made it. Repairs began in December and lasted until February 1943. The work included rebuilding the bridge, repairing hull damage, replacing destroyed equipment, and upgrading some systems. She emerged from repair in February 1943 and returned to the fleet. She was assigned to Rabaul to support operations in the Solomons. But by now, American forces had air superiority. Rabaul was under constant air attack. Japanese ships in harbor were primary targets. On 23 October 1943, American carrier aircraft attacked Rabaul Harbor. Aoba was moored at the time. The aircraft targeted her with bombs and torpedoes. She was hit by one torpedo amidships and multiple bomb near misses. The torpedo flooded compartments. The bombs caused structural damage and fires. She began listing. Damage control prevented her sinking. The flooding was contained. The fires were extinguished. But the damage was severe. She could not sail. Tugs towed her to shallow water where she was beached to prevent sinking. Temporary repairs allowed her to move under her own power to Kur in December 1943. This was the second time Aoba was reported sunk. American pilots reported her destroyed at Rabaul. Intelligence accepted the report. Aoba was again listed as sunk, but again, she survived. Repairs at Kur lasted until September 1944. The work was extensive. The torpedo damage required cutting away damaged sections and welding in new plates. The structural damage from bombs required reinforcement. The ship was essentially rebuilt amidships. But by September 1944, Japan's strategic situation had collapsed. The Philippines were being invaded. The fleet was preparing for decisive battle. Aoba was obsolete, slow, and mechanically unreliable. She was not assigned to the mobile fleet for the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Instead, she was assigned to transport missions. On 23 October 1944, Aoba departed Manila carrying supplies and troops. She was part of a convoy sailing to Ormoc Bay. American submarines detected the convoy. USS Bream attacked with torpedoes. 2 hit Aoba on her starboard side. The explosions flooded the forward engine room and multiple compartments. The ship lost power. She stopped dead in the water. The flooding was extensive. The crew fought to contain it. They succeeded in preventing immediate sinking, but the ship was crippled. Destroyers towed her to Manila. The damage was assessed as beyond field repair. She needed major dockyard work again. But Manila's facilities were minimal and under constant air attack. Temporary repairs made her barely seaworthy. She limped to Cavite, then to Kure, arriving in November 1944. This was the third time she was reported sunk. Bream reported her destroyed. Intelligence concurred. Aoba was added to the sunk list for the third time, but she reached Kure. Repairs were attempted, but resources were limited. By late 1944, Japan's shipbuilding industry was collapsing. Steel was scarce. Skilled workers were conscripted. Repair priority went to carriers and battleships. Aoba was low priority. Work proceeded slowly. On 19 March 1945, American carrier aircraft struck Kure. The raid targeted ships in the harbor and dockyard facilities. Aoba was hit by multiple bombs. The damage was extensive. Her machinery was destroyed. Her hull was breached in multiple locations. She settled onto the harbor bottom in shallow water. This was the fourth time she was reported sunk. American pilots observed her listing, burning, partially submerged. The report stated Aoba was destroyed. Intelligence accepted it. She was listed as sunk for the fourth time, but her hull remained intact. Salvage crews reflotated her in April. The ship could not move under her own power. Her engines were destroyed. Her propellers were damaged, but she could float. The Japanese Navy towed her to a position near Kure Harbor entrance and moored her. The decision was made to use her as a floating anti-aircraft battery. Her main guns were inoperable, but her anti-aircraft weapons could be repaired. Additional guns were installed. She became a stationary platform for air defense. In this role, she fought through the remaining months of the war. American carrier raids struck Kure repeatedly. Aoba's anti-aircraft guns fired at attacking aircraft. She claimed several shootdowns, though confirmation was impossible. She was bombed multiple times. More damage accumulated, but she remained afloat. On 24 July 1945, American and British carrier aircraft conducted a massive raid on Kure. Over 1,000 aircraft participated. They targeted every ship in the harbor. Aoba was hit by bombs and rockets. Fires broke out. She began flooding again. She listed heavily to port. This was the fifth time she was reported sunk. The carrier pilots reported her destroyed. Post-strike assessment listed her as sunk. Intelligence concurred. Aoba was marked as destroyed for the fifth time. She was not sunk. She had settled onto the bottom in shallow water, but her upper works remained above water. Her anti-aircraft crews continued manning their guns during subsequent raids. The ship, while no longer truly seaworthy, remained in commission as a gun platform. On 28 July, another raid struck Kure. Aoba was hit again. More flooding, more fires. She settled further. By early August, she was resting on the bottom with only her superstructure and guns above water. But her guns still fired. On 15 August 1945, Japan surrendered. Aoba was technically still in commission. She was the last of her class. Kinugasa had been sunk at Guadalcanal in November 1942. Kako had been sunk by submarine in August 1942. Furutaka had been sunk at Cape Esperance in the same battle that first damaged Aoba. Only Aoba survived. After the surrender, she was surveyed. The assessment was that she was irreparable. Her machinery was destroyed. Her hull was too damaged. Refloating was possible, but restoration was not. The decision was made to scrap her in place. In 1946, salvage crews cut her down to the waterline. The usable metal was removed. The rest was left on the harbor bottom. The final scrapping continued intermittently until 1948. By 1949, nothing remained above water. Aoba had finally been destroyed, not by American weapons, but by Japanese scrapping crews. The count of how many times she was reported sunk varies by source. American intelligence listed her as destroyed at least 5 times. Cape Esperance, Rabaul, Manila, and twice at Kuri. Japanese records show she survived all of these and remained in commission until surrender. This created confusion during the war. American intelligence knew a ship named Aoba existed. They knew she had been damaged multiple times, but they kept reporting her sunk. Each time, she reappeared. Intelligence analysts questioned whether multiple ships were being called Aoba or whether reports of her destruction were wrong. The truth was simpler. Aoba was extremely hard to kill. Her hull was tough. Her damage control was effective. Her crew was competent. And she was lucky. Multiple times, the damage should have been fatal. Each time, she survived just long enough to reach port for repairs. The pattern was consistent. Take catastrophic damage. Be reported destroyed. Limp to port barely floating. Undergo repairs. Return to service. Repeat. From October 1942 to July 1945, Aoba cycled through this pattern 5 times. Each cycle left her weaker. The damage accumulated. The repairs were less complete each time. The ship became progressively less capable. By 1945, she could not move under her own power. She was a hulk used as a gun platform. But she remained in commission. Part of her survival was structural. Aoba-class cruisers had good compartmentalization. Damage to one section did not necessarily doom the ship. The hull design was robust. She could absorb tremendous punishment and remain afloat. Part was damage control skill. Japanese damage control doctrine emphasized fighting the ship until it sank. Crews were trained to manage flooding, fight fires, and maintain buoyancy under extreme conditions. Aoba's crew demonstrated this repeatedly. Part was luck. The torpedoes and bombs that hit her struck in positions that were survivable. If the damage had been slightly different, she would have sunk. The margin was thin but sufficient. Part was Japanese determination. Even when the ship was crippled, the Navy refused to write her off. Resources were scarce, but repairs continued. She was valuable even in degraded condition. A crippled cruiser was better than no cruiser. This determination created the ghost legend, the ship that would not die, the cruiser that kept fighting even after being destroyed. American intelligence struggled to track her because the pattern made no sense. Ships reported as sunk do not reappear. Aoba reappeared 5 times. The confusion was genuine on both sides. American pilots who bombed Aoba at Kure in July 1945 believed they were attacking a new target. They did not know she had been bombed before, reported sunk before, and survived before. Japanese officers receiving damage reports questioned whether the ship could be repaired again. The answer kept being yes, barely. After the war, American naval intelligence conducted comprehensive analysis of Japanese ship losses. They had to reconcile multiple conflicting reports about Aoba. The ship was listed as sunk at Cape Esperance, at Rabaul, off Manila, and twice at Kure, but Japanese records showed she surrendered in commission. The analysis concluded that Aoba had survived extraordinary damage through a combination of structural resilience, effective damage control, and good fortune. The ship had been close to sinking multiple times but never quite crossed the threshold. Each time, repairs brought her back to minimal functionality. The analysts also noted that reporting her as sunk was reasonable based on observed damage. Pilots attacking a burning, listing cruiser had no way to know it would survive. The assessments were justified by evidence available at the time. The ship just kept refusing to die. This refusal became part of Japanese Navy legend during and after the war. Aoba was the ship that survived everything. Her crew was proud of this. They had kept her afloat through battles and bombings that destroyed newer, stronger ships. Their competence and determination had saved her repeatedly. But the cost was high. Approximately 200 crew died across all her battles. Hundreds more were wounded. The ship consumed enormous resources in repairs that might have been better used elsewhere. By 1945, she was obsolete and barely functional. The question arose whether saving her had been worth the cost. Strategically, probably not. The resources spent repairing Aoba could have built patrol boats, repaired damaged carriers, or supported land defenses. She contributed little in her final year. Her value was symbolic more than practical. But symbols matter. Aoba demonstrated that Japanese ships and crews would fight until destroyed. She represented defiance. Even crippled and obsolete, she remained in commission, her guns firing at American aircraft. That meant something to the Navy even if the strategic value was minimal. After the war, surviving crew members were interviewed about their service on Aoba. They described a ship that was always damaged, always being repaired, never quite whole. They described fighting her when systems did not work, when watertight doors would not seal, when pumps failed. They described making her function through improvisation and sheer will. One crew member described the ship as a ghost. She was dead multiple times but refused to stop moving. Her bridge was destroyed, but she still sailed. Her engines were broken, but she still floated. She was a ghost ship crewed by men who would not accept that she was finished. This description captured the essence. Aoba should have died at Cape Esperance. She should have died at Rabaul. She should have died off Manila. She should have died at Cure. Each time, she survived just long enough to be salvaged and repaired. Then she went back to war and was destroyed again. The cycle continued until Japan surrendered. Only then did Aoba finally stop fighting. Only then did the ghost become truly dead. The historical assessment is clear. Aoba was an obsolete cruiser that survived through accident and determination far longer than she should have. She consumed resources disproportionate to her contribution. She was inefficient use of scarce repair capacity. By 1945, she was strategically worthless. But she was also proof that ships do not sink until crews let them. Aoba's crew never let her sink. They fought for her when she was burning. They repaired her when she was crippled. They kept her in commission when scrapping would have been easier. Their determination kept the ghost afloat. This determination was characteristic of Japanese Navy culture. Ships were not just metal and machinery. They were embodiments of naval spirit. Abandoning a ship meant abandoning that spirit. As long as the ship could float, it would fight. Aoba floated until the end. The cost was approximately 200 dead crew and vast resources consumed in repairs. The benefit was one obsolete cruiser, serving as a floating gun platform in the final months of the war. The calculation seems negative, but the crew who kept her alive saw it differently. They had saved their ship 5 times. They had refused to let her die. They had demonstrated that Japanese sailors could overcome any damage, survive any attack. That demonstration had value beyond strategic calculation. In the end, Aoba was scrapped because the war ended, not because she sank. This distinction mattered to her crew. They had kept her alive. They had won their battle even if Japan lost the war. The ghost survived until the guns fell silent. This is the story of IJN Aoba. The cruiser reported sunk 5 times. The ghost of the Solomons. The ship that would not die until Japan surrendered. She was old, slow, and obsolete. She was damaged repeatedly beyond what should have been survivable. She consumed resources better used elsewhere. She contributed little strategically in her final years, but she survived. Her crew kept her afloat through fires, floods, and explosions. They repaired her after catastrophic damage. They sailed her back to port when she should have sunk en route. They refused to abandon her even when abandonment was rational. The ghost floated until the end. That is all her crew wanted. That is what they achieved. History records her as a footnote, an obsolete cruiser that survived the war through luck and stubborn damage control. The ships that died, the carriers and battleships destroyed in climactic battles, those receive attention. Aoba is mentioned briefly, if at all. But her crew, remember, they kept the ghost alive. They fought her when she was broken. They brought her home 5 times when she should have sunk. That is their story. The ghost of the Solomons, the ship that would not die, the crew that refused to let her. Until the surrender. Aoba floated until the scrapping. She remained in commission until the end. She was their ship. The ghost survived. That was enough.